2, 3, and. Kadosh, Kadosh, Echad Yisrael, Baruch Shemo Adonai.
Well, good evening. It is so wonderful to see you here. We're welcoming you to our very first presentation of Answers for This Time with Dr. Stephen Pidgeon, who is in Alaska of Sefer Publishing, and Jessica, not myself, of Eating Wild Honey and Locusts. And it's a sister ministry working with Dr. Pidgeon. And this program, he has put together to cater for the UK, the British Isles, and the European audience, including Australia and New Zealand, where we're getting a real impact from. So this is for you because it is on his heart. And what's on my heart is the fact that for a very long time, that we've been journeying together, a lot of us here in the different groups that we minister to, and you have questions, and I'm on that same quest, and I've come into relationship with Dr. Stephen Pidgeon, who is able to really help and mentor us and help us in our countries just to get on and do what we require to do. And so many of you have house churches, have home churches now. And so this is critical for you because it's become fellowship, but also it's seed, it's word for you. So it's a real privilege to serve you and do this. And Dr. Stephen Pidgeon, I just want to thank you again for your heart, for your mission, separating the time into this nation, because you do so much and the people really feel catered for, like this is bespoke to them. And that's what's important. So I bless you and I thank you for this. It's just tremendous. And everyone says that all the time. So this is our opportunity to bless you and thank you for your investment into their lives, into their families, into their communities, and the new gatherings, the new type of ecclesias that are coming as a result of this. Thank you, Stephen.
Well, I thank you, Jessica. Thank you for those remarks. Thank you very much. You know, of course, the United Kingdom and Australia, New Zealand, Canada, South Africa, and the rest of the EU, right? We cannot leave out the EU.
No.
These are very important places in the kingdom, and they have a very important history in the kingdom. And because that history is so important and the foundations have been there, but yet when I travel through Europe, what do I find? I find empty churches, all these cathedrals, these giant cathedrals, which are now museums and event centers, and they're everything but a place of gathering and a place of worship. They have, some of these places have token ministries where you'll have 25 people or maybe 50 people show up, but that's about it. The vast majority of Europeans do not worship at the temple of Yah. They worship at different temples, the mall, Tesco, these kinds of places. Right?
Very true.
And so what we see is that when we talk about what's happening in Europe, what's happening in the UK. Now, look, Jessica, we're at a very, 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 with a capital V, critical time in human history.
Yes.
And I'm going to begin with kind of talking about the preliminary kind of time schedule. We saw something happen that a lot of people want to debate about, but there was something very critical that happened on September 23rd, 2017. And this particular date was a date where there was a sign, a wonder seen in heaven. Now, using my Sefer here, I've got the Millennium Edition. And this particular
smaller. Okay.
Font edition. This is the 14 point. It's not the collector's edition, but it is the 14 point, and it's a little bit heavy and kind of a little bit difficult to maneuver because the font is so big.
Yeah.
And so this has been a lot of work presenting this book because the size of the scope of the work is so big. There's only one publisher in the world that can print it.
Wow.
In Britain.
I appreciate the big font. I've got mine here. I couldn't do it without. It's a good quality font.
Yes, yeah, and the 10-point font is on a heavier paper and is much more negotiable, much more manageable. The book that you have, it's much more manageable. But
Right.
we see something in Revelation 12. In Revelation 12, we have something here that is given to us, and it's we call it chazon, the book chazon. And
That's all.
but this particular passage in 12:1, right? And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Okay, so first of all, should any believer look to a sign in the heavens, right? That's one question, the Mazarot. And of course, E.W. Bullinger wrote a great book on the Mazarot. I forget what the name of it is now. Something in the stars. I forget that. But anyway, he has a fantastic work, which, by the way, it's available as a free download
Okay.
on the net. And I'll just have to remember its name. But anyway, this book discussing the Mazarot, discussing the signs in the heavens, and we are told in Genesis 14 that we are to use the lesser light and the greater light and the stars also for signs, for seasons, for days, and for years.
Mm.
Now, this is a command. This is not a suggestion, right? This is a Torah mitzvot. This is a command from Yah. This is what we call the Paradise Torah. So this Torah precedes Moshe. Okay, these were commands that were given before Moshe, and these commands are pretty important. I mean, you have things like the command to stewardship, to be a proper steward of the land and animals. You're called to do that because you're given dominion over all the creatures on earth and the earth. So that calls us to stewardship. It calls us to responsibility.
Yes.
To a responsible stewardship. Now, this is what is called to, this is a Torah command from the first book in Scripture, Genesis.
Yes.
This is never mentioned in Judaism, right? They begin with their 613 mitzvot in chapter 5 of Exodus. They don't discuss the Paradise Torah. And the reason they don't is because Moshe contradicted the Paradise Torah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you see this in the Gospels because the scribes and the Pharisees come to Mashiach and they say, well, tell us, Moses gave us a certificate of divorce. What do you have to say about that? And Mashiach looks at him and says, well, Moses suffered to give you a certificate of divorce because of the hardness of your hearts.
Yes.
I tell you, in the beginning, it was not so. Now, this is a very critical remark because when you take the concept that Mashiach would say, there was a Torah that preceded the Torah of Moshe, which was in the beginning, and the Torah that Moshe gave you was inconsistent, contradicted, overruled, and otherwise changed the Torah that was given in the beginning. In the beginning, it was not so. Very important phrase. So when we look at this Paradise Torah, we see, first of all, you see stewardship. You were given dominion over everything that Yah had created on this planet. We're given dominion over. And we have been completely and totally and thoroughly irresponsible where this is concerned. Now, from my point of view, in my heart, the most egregious sin that has been in place since the end of World War II is what they call planned obsolescence.
Planned obsolescence.
Planned obsolescence. Instead of building a product that is intended to last for as long as it can possibly last, we now build products that are intended to last for 18 months.
Yes. And if you go to a manufacturing store, they'll say the same thing to you. Microwaves, cookers, hoovers. Yeah.
Right. And then look at the computers. Computers come and they go, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I've got a computer for 3 years. In computer life, that's 21 years.
Yeah.
I said, well, what happened to all of those great big TV screens we used to have that we call computers? And this, that, and the other thing, and all these big hard drives and everything else. Well, they ended up in a landfill in Nigeria that goes on for thousands and thousands of acres.
Yeah.
If they end up in some puddle in the middle of the ocean, floating around trying to kill fish.
Yes.
This is the thing that happens with planned obsolescence. So one of the first moral certitudes that we have to look to as people is we need to pull away from the artificial culture and this planned obsolescence culture. Now, to give you an example, just some short examples.
That's dynamic in itself. It's a revelation. It's obvious, but you don't think it until you verbalize it like that.
Right. So, for instance, when you go to the store, you carry your own bags
Yes.
into which you fit your groceries. Now, if you do this, you don't come home with all that extra plastic or all those extra paper bags. There's nothing being used there at all. You have the same bag, this utile bag that you can take and fill it and bring it home, right?
Yeah.
And you can do that over and over. Now, what about the idea of coffee? Oh, we go and get a coffee cup. Starbucks, who claims to be this eco-friendly organization, is very eco-unfriendly. They give you these ridiculous plastic caps over the top of your coffee.
Yeah.
When you get a cup of coffee in the old days, you'd get it in a coffee cup like this,
Yeah.
right? And you'd go in. There was no such thing as anybody handing you a cup of coffee in a paper cup.
No, or paper straws, which just melt away,
Paper
dissolve away.
straws and the paper cups and the plastic tops, and then all the young people who are eco-friendly. Oh, give me one of those venti frappuccinos, with the gigantic plastic cup and the gigantic plastic top over the top. Those things are just, obviously they can be. I know people who make those cups, and you can completely recycle that stuff. They scrap it, they melt it again, and then it comes out as another cup.
Yeah.
And they can do that over and over again. But nonetheless, the idea of you carrying your own cup and saying, "Hey, look, I've got my cup, fill it," which they will do at most coffee shops. They'll fill your own cup. But when you think about ideas like, in the old days, you could buy a refrigerator, and that refrigerator would last for 100 years.
Yes.
And the only thing that would cause the refrigerator to fail is the Freon would leak.
Yeah.
But of course, they criminalized Freon. Why did they criminalize Freon? Because Africa would have been able to keep its food stored. We don't want that to happen. We want them to all get E. coli, right? And so this is why Freon was banned. But you can see that in the old days, things were built to last and to last as long as possible. Now, the Chinese build stuff that has an immediate flaw in it.
Yes.
It has some flaw in it that's going to cause it to fail in a very short period of time. And then the device you purchase ends up in a landfill. Okay, so that's irresponsible. That's not proper stewardship. And the same thing goes with animal life. When you see what goes on in Scripture, it talks about how you are to kill an animal. Well, it's extremely important because Yah is telling you, like the business of the Passover lamb, right? You take the precious, lovable. I don't know. Have you ever held a new lamb?
No, but I've heard from so many how beautiful, how tiny it is, and the neat they are. Just a beautiful sensation.
Oh, yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, you're holding this little baby lamb, and they're just cute and cuddly and beautiful form. And you take that lamb and you bring it into your house so your kids fall in love with it.
Yeah.
From the 10th, and then on the 14th, slaughter it.
Yeah.
Why must you slaughter that lamb on the 14th? Because Yah wants you to know what it is to take a life.
Wow.
He wants you to know what it is to take a life. Now, people who are, they buy their, I did a show with one person who believed that all meat was just came in these beautiful plastic packages in the back of the store. They had no idea that there was a slaughterhouse and that animals were carved up and so on and so forth. Now, I have friends that are cattle ranchers.
Yeah.
And of course, the steers they raise, after the steer is 2 years old, it goes in for slaughter. But it becomes critically important about how that steer is slaughtered. If you take that steer such that steer figures out it is about to be slaughtered, that meat is ruined.
Just repeat that again, please. The reason why they are slaughtered at that time, and when you said there's a spiritual significance, and just go back into that what you just said, please.
Well, if the steer figures out it's being slaughtered, that will completely destroy the meat. His meat will be full of adrenaline and it will be almost inedible. And so the cattle ranchers who are responsible about slaughtering their steers for meat, they make sure that the process is humane, is humane.
Ah,
Now, you
I,
can't say that about chicken slaughter. There's nothing humane about that at all. And so, these kinds of things, scripture calls us to be cognizant of this.
yes.
If you're going to be a meat eater, then you need to understand that an animal has given its life for you to eat that food, right? And I'm not saying don't be a meat eater. I'm not preaching veganism here or vegetarianism. I'm just saying that you have to be responsible with that kind of thing. This is a call to essential morality because, again, the Paradise Torah talks about this essential morality. Now, another moral issue is what? Yah created them, male and female, he created them, that a man should leave his mother and father and cleave unto his woman, that the two should become one flesh. Now, this too is the scriptural edict that Mashiach gives when he says, Moshe contradicted this. In the beginning, it was not so. Haven't you read that Yah created man, male and female, he created them, that a man should leave his mother and father, cleave unto his woman, and the two should become one flesh. This becomes a central tenet in the life of people. And I can tell you, I used to do family law, and I can tell you many times the divorces happened because someone in the marriage did not leave and cleave. Still cleaving to their parents, they were still cleaving to all of this. They would not leave that relationship to join their spouse. And the truth is, you join your spouse because you embark into a world of adventure, let's call it. It can also be a world of danger. It can be a world of, of massive failures, but it can also be a world of massive successes. It's an adventure. You join your spouse to embark on this adventure, but you are to cleave to one another. When times get desperate, if it's desperate for you, it's desperate for him.
Yeah.
Or it's your case, right? If it's desperate for your wife, it's desperate for you too. You can't say, well, look, I'm going back to my parents' house. Hope you make it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That doesn't, you have to leave and cleave. Now, when you leave and cleave, then you become one flesh. When you become one flesh, guess what? That's called children.
Yes.
The children are of the one flesh of the mother and father.
Yes.
They have the DNA of the mom and they have the DNA of the dad. And that's just the way it is. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
So the concept there is that the mother and father would become one flesh forever. They would be united as a single unit, and that their children would reflect this one flesh, and that the children would be raised in that environment with the same mother and the same father. Difficult issues for most of us in the modern world because we've been splattered against the curb by a progressive society that has just, launched artillery shells into the family. Hey, how's your family doing? Oh, well, boom. Okay, well, let's see if we can bomb it. How's it doing now? You guys still surviving? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking that, and you verbalized it.
The social of the way it's gone, right? So another Paradise Torah. But then we have this Torah provision in Genesis 1:14 that says that the lesser light and the greater light and the stars also were, so that means the sun, the moon, and the stars also were given for signs. And the word there in the Hebrew is odiot, right? Odiot.
Odiot.
Signs, or otot, you might say otot. Signs, seasons, or appointed times, days, and years. All right. So we know that Genesis 1:14 gives us the Paradise Torah, says signs in the heavens. You can look to the sun, the moon, and the stars for signs. Okay. Then we read in Revelation 12, and there appeared a great wonder or a great sign in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. So what do we see here? We see the sun, the greater light, the moon, the lesser light, and also the stars. The sign is given to us. And specifically, it is tied to the woman who is clothed with the sun, and she has the moon under her feet, and there are 12 stars in her hair. Well, this sign appeared for the first time in human history on September 17th, 2017. September 21st.
23rd. 23rd or 21st?
23rd. September
Right.
23rd, 2017.
Mhm.
Okay, now with this sign showing in heaven, this was a sign that marked the beginning of this Revelation 12 passage. Now we see with the Revelation 12 passage, we have to try to understand. It goes on to say, and she being with child cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his head. Now this is Draco, right? This is the constellation Draco, which in fact did appear in this sign too at the same day. His tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven, did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a male child. Now, actually, there in the Greek, it says a male son, right? So it's kind of a double, a double masculine, if you will.
Mhm.
It was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. Okay, so ruling all nations with rod of iron is an indication that the sign that's going to be in the woman is going to be Jupiter, because it's the ruler, it's the ruling planet, it's going to be Jupiter. So Jupiter was in the womb of Virgo at the time of this sign. And the child was cut up to Elohim and to his throne. Okay, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared of Elohim that they should feed her for 1,203 days. All right, now if you go back and you look at this timing, you will see that this timing is very, very interesting, because we see that this 1,260 days begins in October 1st. Why? Because it's a male child. And according to the Torah, the woman is unclean for 7 days, and then the male child is presented on the 8th day. Well, the 8th day from September 23rd was October 1st. And October 1st, 2017 was Yom Kippur. Excuse me. Yeah, it was Yom Kippur. And it was the day of the ritual sacrifice in Las Vegas. There was a ritual sacrifice in Las Vegas, a mass shooting. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what was the event that happened?
Mhm.
Wow.
There was a mass shooting that was supposedly staged from this hotel that was owned by Bill Gates and Sheikh bin Talal.
Really?
Yeah, the Four Seasons. And then they opened up on a crowd of people that were attending a country western concert.
I do remember that bit, yeah.
Yes, all of that happened on October 1st. And so with that happening, we begin this marker. Boom, that begins the 1,260 days, and it marches us into March of 2021, where we get the second tier. So in this first tier, there was according to verse 7 of Revelation 12, there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought against his angels and prevailed not. Neither was their place found in heaven anymore. So Satan is being cast out of heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent. I don't know if you caught my presentation last night. I discussed this idea of the serpent, right? The serpent cult, right? And who this serpent was, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceives the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So Satan comes to the earth after 1,260 days. Now, what we have seen on earth has been very, very interesting, because we have all of these people taking orders, whether it be Emmanuel Macron, or whether it be Boris Johnson, or whether it be Scholz in Germany, or whether it's Joe Biden in the U.S., Justin Castro in Canada. Doesn't make any difference who it is.
No.
What do they call him? ScoMo in Australia, or Jacinda in New Zealand. All of these leaders are taking orders, and they're taking orders from someone. Who's the someone taking orders?
Yeah.
Why do all these leaders appear with a black eye?
Yes.
Who's got the right hook? Who's delivering this right hook?
Mm.
And all these people have black eyes, and then you see that all of these leaders are taking orders. There's no one who's like, oh yeah, it was my idea that since we have this outbreak of a pandemic, that we should do this. No, I was told to do this, and so I locked the country down. I was told to do this, so I forced the mask.
Yeah.
I was told to do this, so I mandated the snake bite. I was
Yes.
told. And
Yeah.
this is the case even with the president here in the United States, who unfortunately suffers with advanced dementia
Mm.
and other issues that really do not allow him to effectively govern or to effectively make a decision. And he's made it very
Mm.
clear he does not make decisions, he takes orders. He's made
And
that very, very clear.
is that from FEMA or a higher power?
Well, I think that we have somebody on earth that is directing orders that is not from this earth.
Okay.
And,
That's
this
good to
points out
hear.
that Hasatan is on earth now, giving
Mm.
directions, giving orders. And we're beginning to see there's a number of prophets now that are talking about this idea of mankind being prepared
Mm.
to do several things. One is there's two quests that are going on. One quest is to remove the soul from man.
Mm.
This is a big part of what's happening.
Yes,
This was in the
absolutely. Yep.
to remove the soul from man. Now, in removing the soul from man, you have the opportunity here to, once the soul is removed, basically all you have is the flesh. And because that's all you have is the
So
flesh,
good. Yeah.
the DNA can be changed, can be altered, and that DNA can be altered to accommodate an interface with, once again, fallen watchers.
Wow.
As it was in the day of Noah, so it
So
is in the
it's,
days of the returning of the coming of the Son of Man.
I've never heard that for 2 years explained better, Stephen. And that's what so many of the people here are joining to get these little bits of the jigsaw. You verbalized it so well, even with the man ruling here now. People hide from that. You've just flabbergasted us with something that we've been waiting for and just got so conditioned to not hearing. So please, I just want to tell you how exciting it is on the different platforms that I'm seeing. What's Yom Kippur? He's actually mentioning something maybe to do with an antichrist. So please, they're excited with this.
Yeah, well,
Speaking to
a lot of
them.
people have been talking about, they want to talk about the Antichrist, and they
Mm.
want to talk about, whether it's Prince Charles or whether it's
Mm.
Barack Obama or whether it's this, that, or the other thing. But the Antichrist and the false prophet, of course, they're relevant to our discussion. But first, we have to deal with Revelation 12, which is Hasatan is on the earth, and he is now making war with the saints. He is making war with those who have the testimony of Mashiach and
Wow.
who are keeping the commandments. This is who he's
Okay.
trying to make war with. But unfortunately for Hasatan, he has to make war with Yahweh. And Yahweh is not allowing him to touch his anointed. Not right now. Even though they're trying to get there, they're doing their best to get there. They haven't arrived at the political authority yet that allows the Antichrist to stand up on the stage and say, we're criminalizing the faith. It's not going to be just a criminalization of scripture. We're criminalizing the faith. Now, they've come very, very close. I mean, you had, for instance, President Biden. I don't even want to use that phrase. We had Joe Biden,
Mm.
who came out and said that the Trump followers were the most deranged, extreme political force in American history. And what you see is the reason he could make that statement is because the vanguard of progressivism, they believe that their ideology, which is an ideology that includes transgenderism, LGBT advancement, abortion on demand even after the child is born for
Mm.
28 days,
Mm.
mandatory training in transgenderism for kindergartners, these kinds of things. This is their ideology because they believe that, first of all, there is no deviancy in the world that is not worthy of acceptance, except for people who follow the faith. That is not worthy of acceptance. That needs to be denounced. That needs to be criminalized. That needs to be kicked out of the public square because, in their view, it's insanity. You see, to believe in a
Insanity.
creator is insane.
Mm.
To have a standard that says, no, we discipline ourselves, that's insanity. What's sane is to allow every kind of deviance, every kind of perversion, and accept that into the public square so that somebody who goes out and murders 10 people doesn't feel so guilty they want to kill themselves. You see?
How does this fall in with VMAT 2?
Well, with what?
VMAT, what they're putting into the snake bite, or it was
Oh, yeah.
proposed at one time, change you fundamentalism.
Oh, yeah. Well, what's going on there with the snake bite, I always refer to that as the snake bite. And if you recall, most people had both fangs.
Wow, very good. Yeah.
And then some people got a third, right? And some
Mhm.
people were asked to take a fourth and even a fifth. Well, what you have inside the snake bite is you have something that is, first of all, we know it has an mRNA component, an mRNA, a messenger RNA. And all the research that's been done on it, and there's a billion people out there that have done this research, we know that there's a number of factors inside that. One is there is this robust, that appears to be almost immortal parasite that is released in the system and grows. And that parasite has a delivery mechanism. Then you also have what's called the spike protein. And the spike protein is a protein that comes into the cell. Now, the spike protein is synthetic. This is what's so important about this. A typical inoculation would be used using some isolated fragment of the virus that had been identified. So you identify smallpox, or you identify whatever, measles. You have this virus, and you take a portion of that, and then you would inject that into the person, and then the person would build up antibodies to that particular protein, that particular aspect of the virus. Would build up antibodies, and those antibodies would be present to block a further incursion of that particular virus, because you have antibodies that are specific to it. That's how it would usually work. These new ones are not like that at all. They created a synthetic protein, called the spike protein.
Yeah.
And this spike protein was designed, and the reason they created a synthetic is because part of what is causing the exosome that appears as a virus in the system, but isn't, it's an exosome. It's not a virus. That exosome that appears in the system is actually caused from exposure to microwave radiation in the Cinco Gaia,
Yeah.
right? In the Cinco Gaia
Yes.
mechanism, which is also now 6. And so what you see is that microwave frequency, which has had zero testing on human beings, none, we're just going to deploy it. Why? Because our robots require that kind of bandwidth. You don't require it. I don't require it. But some robot requires it. An automated vehicle that's going to drive down the road requires it. Automated trucks that we're going to use to replace your job requires it, right?
Yeah.
That requires it. Okay, now all of this stuff is great. All these engineers come up with this forward-thinking stuff. They all have all these ideas. This is where we're going to go. But they're not there. In fact, Ford Motor just posted a $3.5 billion loss on its electric vehicle line. And one of the electric vehicle companies that just came out with his own thing, he said, look, electric vehicles are not going to happen. We don't even have enough lithium to build batteries for the cars that are currently on the road, let alone build these massive battery packs for all these electric vehicles that everybody's going to be mandated to get in. Why? Because a politician is an ignorant person. They don't know anything except how to raise money and run a campaign. Period. They don't know anything else. Ask them a question. Well, I had some idea. I graduated high school. I can answer a question. Where's your money, right? Give me your money and tell me what to do. As soon as I've got your money in my wallet, then you figure out what it is and I'll do it.
Yeah.
Right? This is the basic thinking behind politicians. So these guys have no idea. Well, look, those Teslas are all working. Let's make everybody get into an electric car, like California has passed a law that there will only be electric vehicles in California in 2030. Now I can tell you that's going to be hard to do, given that all the lithium in the world is in Afghanistan and is now in the hands of China.
Yeah.
And that all the nickel in the world that goes along with that, a nickel cadmium or nickel lithium battery, all the nickel in the world is in Russia. Wait a minute. We didn't know that. Yeah, that's right. You didn't know that. You didn't know when you started a war with Russia that you guys weren't going to get this anymore.
Yeah.
So now, so these are the kinds of forward thinking that's gone. But when we talk about the average person looking at this, what do we do? How do we respond? How do we move in this world? Now, you asked the question about the snake bite. So the snake bite has multiple components. It has luciferase in it,
Yes.
which is an enzyme that migrates to the back of the right hand.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
it illuminates. You can take a UV light and put it over your hand, and it illuminates your veins. And so
Yes.
you can see whether or not you have had the snake bite by putting a black light over or UV light over your hand and seeing whether it's illuminated from the luciferase.
Mm.
It also has an mRNA component, and the mRNA component, coupled with the spike protein invades the cell. When the spike protein invades the cell, the RNA duplicate that comes off the DNA, so the DNA duplicates itself, right?
Yeah.
It duplicates itself and creates RNA, and the RNA is going to move to create another cell.
Yeah.
That RNA is permanently manipulated.
Mm.
So every cell where the spike protein resides becomes autoimmune deficient. AIDS.
Oh.
So,
Oh.
so what you see is that as this and this is a rapidly growing self-reproducing. So every cell in the body is going to completely reproduce itself in 7 years. And so in 7 years, every cell in your body will have a
Yeah.
spike protein in it and will be autoimmune deficient.
And relating to what you said, AIDS. Wow, goodness me. And I don't know if it's still the case, but it was proposed at the beginning, like 2 years ago, that they put that through your letterbox and you put it as a plaster onto your right hand on your palm. And it's 100 fang-like shapes, and sugar particles, they dissolve into your bloodstream, and that's it. They're there, all to do with that luminous part and everything that you've explained. Whether that will still come about, that you can self-administer that, we'll see. But
Well, they're
that
trying to
was
push for it. Of course, they're
mm,
still at the table. They haven't left the table.
no.
Well, in addition to that, there's also nanobots that are
Yes.
inside the system. These
Yeah.
nanobots combined with graphene oxide inside the
Mm.
system. The graphene oxide is almost intelligent. It appears to be sentient,
And what does sentient mean?
intelligent.
Intelligent, right?
And
Hmm.
so when you put the graphene oxide in the system, it goes, it
Mm.
finds each other. Each one of the nanobots find each other and they join together to create a
Yeah.
circuit inside your body.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
circuit inside your body, when you
Mm.
have a broadcast wave, can broadcast immediately to you
Yes.
because now
Yeah.
you're a circuit. So you have been prepared for the extinguishment. And the thinking is, look, AI is your God,
Mm.
AI is your creator,
Mm.
not Yah. You
Mm.
see, not Yah. And the people
Yes.
who are saying, well, look, we don't want to be that. Well, Elon Musk is saying you need to have a microchip put in your brain.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Now, the microchip in your brain is not going to make you smarter. It's going to make you perform smarter, supposedly, because Google's going to be in your brain, or Siri's going to be in your brain, or Alexa's going to be in your brain. And so when you need to have an answer to a question, hey, what's the answer to this? You get the answer because the chip is an interface with the search engine.
Mm.
What do you know? Nothing. It'll come a point where you won't even be able to remember your own name
Yes. Yeah.
because the chip is going to be doing the functioning. In the meantime,
Exactly.
those who do not take the chip are going to be like those who did not take the snake bite.
Mm.
Now, I've had many people that are in my group
Yeah.
that are, that listen to what I have to say were advised very early on. I began talking in August of 2020 about the snake
Okay.
bite and about what it was. And so many of them have avoided it and have successfully walked through
Yeah.
the first part of the gauntlet without having the snake bite.
Mm.
As a result of that, they are considered, peculiar people.
Yeah.
You
Hmm.
know, you guys over there, right? And there's going to be another round. There's going to be yet another
Yes.
endemic. There's another one coming. I think in Britain, they have concluded that they have enough people who are snake bitten
Mm.
now that they can move forward with
Yes.
the green passport.
Mm.
Now, the green passport was pioneered in Ukraine, which is not a nation. Okay. Ukraine is a proxy state that is completely controlled by NATO, most dominantly the United States and the UK. There is no Ukraine. There is no Duma. They're making any laws. There is no president. The so-called president is just a TV spokesperson. He's an entertainer. He's not
Mm.
a president. He
Yeah.
is not a leader.
Active.
He cannot make a deal to end the war. He can't because he's not in control. So he is the one that decides. So because of this, in Ukraine, they are the tip of the spear. You can look at Ukraine and you can see, what does the world have in mind for us? What does the AI controlled world, which is, by the way, is an open interface with Satan, right? When they hit
Very
quantum
true.
computing, this is the mark in March of 2021. When they hit quantum computing, which, by the way, is 7 levels beyond nanotechnology, 7 levels. When they hit quantum computing, they were in open interface with the second heaven, which is where Satan dwells. They were in open interface. And so they're getting direct information right from Satan as to what to do in this AI world to destroy the souls of men and to instead replace it with an artificial soul that is given to you by AI, that is given to you by a digital technology. You no longer have a ruach. You now have an AI nefesh that is controlling you. And this is why all of a sudden you're going to become immortal. Men will want to die and will not be
Will not be
able
able to. Mm.
because they're going to be totally controlled with this. They're going to be some kind of bionic, digitally controlled, digital functioning, transhuman individual.
Yeah.
And so this is all prep for transhumanism. Now, of course, the thinking at the WEF, the World Economic Forum, is give everybody the snake bite, and those who die. They weren't tough enough. We didn't want them here anyway. We want survival of the fittest. We're evolutionists here. We want survival of the
The
fittest. So
elite.
those who can't do it, let them die. Say goodbye. Right? And and many of them were intended when you talk about the elderly,
Yes.
when you talk about the sick, when you talk about the disabled, and specific races. Specific races were to be targeted by these bioweapons. Genetic
Yes.
bioweapons is what they are, right? Okay. So when you see that kind of thing happening, where does that leave the person who says, my ruach is in Yahweh? My ruach is in Yahweh. And I know that I have a creator. I know my creator lives. I have a ruach. When I know his name Yahweh, I have neshama. When I know him and the son whom he sent, personally, I have yachad. My soul becomes yachad. It becomes united one with Yah and Yahusha. It becomes that.
Beautiful.
So the question for the
That's
believers
wonderful.
in the UK, for those in Northern Ireland, for those in Australia, those in New Zealand, and for those in Ireland, but in Scotland and in Wales and so forth, the question is this: how do you hold on to your ruach? Well, you have to recognize that there is a cost to your faith. It's not free.
No.
In the West, it's been free for, we can just be Christians and hang out and do this, blah, blah, blah. And there's no expense to it at all. Why? Why was there no expense? Because you were on the wide road and you were going through the wide gate. All of a sudden, when you find the narrow gate, everything you ever read about in the gospel, you will be hated by your brothers and sisters. You will be hated by your family. You will be hated by your friends. You will be betrayed by your friends. They will kill you and think they're doing Yah a favor. All of this persecution that's given to you in the Gospels is now suddenly front and center.
Yes. Yeah.
You're now experiencing, now you realize that there is a cost to the faith. There is a cost to the true faith. And the cost to the true faith is that we're trying to retain our beings as organic beings in Yahweh.
Yes. Yeah.
Not synthetic transhumanist, trans devices that are going to be owned and controlled by Hasatan, who is exercising his authority through a digital system. Now think about this. This digital system comes no matter if there's a war between us and Russia and China, okay, the West versus Russia and China.
Yeah.
If there is such a war, which there, in my opinion, there most certainly is going to be a war.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, both of them are going to be walking into whoever wins is going to walk into a digital world. They're going to walk into a digital currency. Now,
Yes.
Ukraine, the tip of the spear, where you have essentially a transgendered homosexual running the country, and he is the poster boy for the World Economic Forum, and they have developed an app on the smartphone in Ukraine called Dia, Diia, Dia. And You could look at it as de-ya, right? De-yaing yourself, getting ya out of your system.
Oh.
De-ya, right? So here it is, dia, and this app is a digital currency. It's a digital ID. It's a snakebite passport, and it includes the social credit system. Now, the social credit system has been introduced in Italy. Are you a good person in our view, or are you insane? Well, how would I be insane? Do you believe that there's a God? Well, you're insane, and your social credit score goes to zero. Well, what is that? Well, when your social credit score goes to zero, which, by the way, they're doing this in Canada as well.
Mhm.
If you don't have the snake bite, you can't buy a plane ticket. You
Mhm.
can't buy a train ticket. You can't get on a bus. You can't get on public transportation unless you can establish that you have the snake bite. We have the same protocol being introduced in Australia under ScoMo. You have the same protocol being introduced in New Zealand, where Jacinda became suddenly a millionaire after this pandemic broke out. Went from being worth $900,000 one year to being worth 25 million the next. Very interesting situation. She,
Mhm.
remarkable investment strategy she had going there. Remarkable.
Mhm.
So anyway, she imposed this draconian mandate, like ScoMo
Yes.
imposed this draconian mandate, and
Australia.
turned Australia into really a police state. Became a police state
Yes.
overnight.
Mhm.
And so because of that, people were being hammered into a corner. You will take the snake bite, or you will not buy or sell. Now, people want to say, I've got people here in the States, oh, well, I can still buy and sell. It must not be the mark. Well, that's because of where you are, and they haven't been able to get here yet because we have the Second Amendment in America, which is
Mhm.
the only reason it hasn't been imposed so far. Every place that doesn't have the Second Amendment, you can't buy or sell. Ask
That-
the
mm.
French,
Wow,
ask
that's an excellent point. Wow.
ask the Germans, ask the Italians, who now have a social credit score. So what's the social credit score? Well, you spoke out against the government. That's a negative 50. You were seen protesting on the street. That's a negative 100. You went to Trafalgar Square and said you didn't want to wear a mask. That's a negative 500. Well, what's your score now? You got a negative 590. And as a negative 590, you can't access your bank account anymore. You can't use any public transportation. You can't access your bank account. I don't know where you're going to live because you're not going to be able to pay your rent because guess what? Your social credit score is too low for you to get your bank account. Right? Which is all going to be expressed in a digital currency. Now, the
Mm.
G7 has already met on this issue and has already adopted the protocol. And most of this was done with, I think under the auspices of 10 Downing Street, where
Mm.
they came in and said, we want to have digital currency directly tied to your performance under our protocol. So we're going to have a digital currency. You're not going to be paid in pounds. Well, they might call them pounds, but it's not going to be any currency in your hand.
Mm.
It's going to be strictly, an electronic interface. And it's going to be strictly electronic interface. And your only access to it is what we allow. So when your income comes into your account, well, we'll take our taxes out first. That comes out immediately. It's a mandatory withdrawal, comes out immediately. Then whatever is left, you can have on certain conditions. One is, what's your snake bite status? Two, what's your obedience to the state look like? Three, what's your criminal record look like? Four, what's your insurance look like? All of these criteria, they're going to look at this and say, well, this person isn't going to get that money. And they actually want to have these kinds of controls. Okay, we've decided, looking at your biometric data that's being reported on your smartphone, looking at your pulse, looking at your respiration, looking at your cholesterol, looking at your sugar count, etc., looking at your liver enzymes, we have decided, hey, you're spending too much time eating fast food. So you go to McDonald's, you try to use your digital interface. Sorry, you're cut off this week. You already had one order of French fries. You're done. Get out of here. We can't sell you any because you can't buy any because your app has already adjusted for, in our opinion, you're overweight. Right? And it's the same thing with anything else. You've washed too much laundry this week. So now your dryer doesn't work and your washing machine doesn't work anymore. It's not going to work until you click up a certain number of points
Yeah.
of non-use until it gets there. Well, what about air conditioning? Now, I know in certain places in Britain, you don't have to worry about air conditioning. Like in certain Scottish castles, right? You don't have to worry about air conditioning. But when you get into France, you'd have to worry about air conditioning, even though I think it's illegal in France. But you have an air conditioner and it's 100 degrees outside and you want to take it down to 80 in the house. Oh, I'm sorry. We've set air conditioning at 84 degrees. You're not taking it to 80. We're going to adjust that. We're going to adjust how much electricity you use in your house. We're going to adjust how much natural gas you use in your house. We're going to adjust how much food you get to eat. We've decided that people are eating way too much meat. So you're only going to be allowed to buy one portion of meat per week, period. You try to go up to the supermarket with your meat and you put your extra meat up there. Sorry. No, you're allowed one piece. That's it. That's what your digital currency will allow. Move that off. There'll be somebody standing there at the cart, moving your stuff out of your basket, putting it in another basket, taking it away. You won't be able to use it. Now, I'm serious. This is the protocol that the G7 has proposed with their digital currency. And Ukraine was the first to roll out the app. So the smartphone, there we go, the smartphone is your slave master. Okay.
Very true.
This is your taskmaster. This is your slave master, the smartphone. It's your slave master. And this smartphone reports on you, everything that you do, and will dictate to you what to do. Now, a lot of the young people who've grown up with cell phones, they've had cell phones. I mean, I don't know how old your kids are, Jessica, but I imagine your kids have phones.
Yes, they all do.
And so they're all smartphones, right? And so the smartphones, the kids' morality is predicated upon their apps. It's predicated upon social media and the apps. What's expected from you on Spotify, on Instagram, on this, that, what's expected of you? And that's what they do. That's the moral code to which they adhere, because they are deadly afraid that this thing is going to turn on them. It's going to turn on them. And when it turns on them, what? Now they're dysfunctional in this electron chip world, in this world, you see? So this environment is coming. So where does this leave the believer? The believer is going to be in a situation where, well, number one, I didn't take the snake bite. Number two, I don't do masks. Number three, I'm not interested in interfacing in your digital world. I'm going to remain outside the digital world. Well, then you are a weirdo. And it's one thing to be peculiar. It's another thing to be criminalized.
Very true.
Right? And we haven't arrived yet, but we're very close to arriving at thought police. Now, in the States, they've introduced a disinformation czar. And this woman that they have hired, who's a disinformation czar, specialized in delivering disinformation for many, many years. And she's now the czar, right? Only my lies are the lies that are going to be told, not yours. Right? And so, and of course, this was told to them by Barack Obama. Barack Obama told Joe Biden, the censorship that we're getting out of Facebook and Twitter and Google and YouTube and so forth is not enough. That's insufficient censorship. We need more censorship. We need a disinformation czar who can come in like one of the Stalin's operatives and tell everybody to shut their face. And if you don't, and so, I know people in the States, for instance, that are part of a group that will go unnamed. They're very outspoken about critical intelligence, which they know. And it's not a question of they don't know it. They know this information. They have the hard data. They can prove it over and over again. They're not allowed to prove anything in courts because the courts do not allow the admission of truth anymore, right? Truth is inadmissible in the courtroom. Always keep that in mind. Truth is inadmissible. But they're not allowed to prove the data that they espouse. And they're now under a FISA investigation, the secret court. A secret court. When do we have secret courts? They haven't had secret courts since the Star Chambers in Britain, going back to before Henry VIII. There were no secret courts. To go back to the Star Chamber, go back to the Inquisition, go back to these are the things that are going on in the United States now, right? Star Chamber, secret courts, on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And these private investigations. And we know that you have one class of people, like the progressives, say, we're going to burn down the Supreme Court building because they're going to reverse Roe versus Wade. You know how afraid the Supreme Court justices are? Let me tell you how bad it is. First of all, last time I was in D.C., you couldn't see any of the sites in D.C. because they had fences up. They had a 24-foot fence around the White House, and then
Yeah.
cops patrolling around the outside of the fence that wouldn't even allow you to approach the fence. So you couldn't see the White House. Now they put up this huge fence around the Supreme Court building because the judges are so afraid. They've left D.C. and they've run off to some island somewhere where they're going to hang out in disguises, I guess. But they are out of the country and away from their homes and away from the Supreme Court, all because it was leaked. They're going to set aside Roe versus Wade. Okay, so the left can come out and say, burn down the Supreme Court and burn the justices alive. No prosecution whatsoever. But if you come out and you say, gee, the 2020 election was rigged, FBI is all over you.
That's right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is the world in which we live. Now, I can tell you for the average believer and for the believer in the UK and in the Five Eyes countries, you have to keep this in mind, that no matter what the disinformation is, and remember, Britain is ruled by three entities, which does not include the Queen, BBC, NHS, and the Masonic Temple.
Yes.
Okay? So whatever the doctrine is inside the Masonic Temple, Scottish Rite Masonry, York Rite Masonry, whatever the rite is, the ritual inside the temple, that is what is dominant in the Anglican Church, the Church of England, Church of Scotland, Church of Wales. All of those churches are dominated by and totally controlled by a Masonic church that is outside that church, that is delivering a different doctrine. It's a different doctrine. And quite frankly, it's the doctrine of the serpent. I'll just tell you that. We were talking about it last night, but it's the doctrine of the serpent. Now, from that, you have two entities. You have the NHS, which is a worshipped idol. It's the serpent, right? It's the caduceus. It's the Asclepius. Look at the markings.
Yeah.
Go look and see if they have a snake outside the building on a pole. Go look. So you have the NHS, which is serpent worship. People are worshiping the Nahushtan. They're worshiping the serpent on the pole. That's NHS. And then you have the BBC, which is the mouth of all of this. And the BBC controls the mindset of the average Brit. This is how you think about this. This is how you think about that. And this is how you think about this.
Yeah.
So they continue to spiel a propaganda that is nonstop. Now, you can tell the authority of the BBC. If you go to downtown Cardiff, you'll find that the ugliest sore put in the historic district is the new BBC building. If you go to Glasgow, the ugliest sore in downtown Glasgow is the BBC building, right? I mean, these are just the facts of the matter, right?
Yeah.
We don't care that you guys used to build in red brick with, with Victorian architecture and Georgian architecture. We're putting in this ugly 1960s kind of bronze, copper, off-color, super ugly semi-mod building right downtown. How's that grab you? So every view that you had from anywhere in this downtown, you have to see this.
Yeah.
Horrible. Why? Because the BBC wants you to know we control the opinion. We control public opinion in Britain. So you see newscasters that are doing alt news in Britain. There's been some very good sources, by the way, like what's his name, Vernon.
I know who you mean, Vernon Hugo Talks and Vernon K. I know who you mean.
Yeah, he does
good.
excellent essay presentations, again, demonstrating the intellectual prowess of a typical Brit, right? Well educated in how to deliver an essay, and he does. And he delivers a very, I want to say Jordan, but that isn't it. But anyway, he does a very good job of delivering. There's some other alt news that comes out as well. They have experienced all kinds of censorship, being shut down. I think they've even experienced some deaths from some of the newscasters, right? And so the truth is very hard to get out when we start talking about what's happening in the UK, right? And of course, Parliament has always had its difficulty in the UK. If you go back to Oliver Cromwell disbanded Parliament twice. There was a time he was going to execute everybody in Parliament
Mm.
because he was so fed up with the corruption. You know, the instant they got in Parliament, they just started voting themselves whatever they wanted to vote.
Mm.
And you can't do that. You know, there has to be a moral foundation. And this is why we talk about the Paradise Torah. We talk about what's found in the Paradise Torah, about this idea of stewardship. We talk
Mm.
about this idea of fundamental morality. We talk about these concepts of honor and integrity in the world. This is part of who we are. And so when you see a situation happen like like you have in Britain, where you have the faith has been splattered on the curb, right?
Yeah.
This was the
Mm.
faith. Drop it from 1,000 feet, and everything is just a little spat. It's just a little raindrop here, here,
Mm.
here, here, here. Everybody's got an opinion. Everybody is their own judge, as it says in the book of Shoftim, right?
Mm.
Every man lived under his own rule.
Yes. Yes.
And so we see this very much in Britain. We see that it's very hard to get a group of Brits together and say, this is a protocol upon which we can all agree. Oh, no, it isn't. We don't agree with that. I disagree. I'm not going to do, I'll do some of that, but I'm not going to do all of that.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so as a consequence, it is hard for the people of faith in any element of their faith to
Mm.
out of their comfort space to become a more peculiar people.
Yeah.
There are several things that are happening that are going to make us more peculiar, whether we like it or not. One is that if you are not a snake-bitten person, that's going to make you peculiar. The next thing that's going to happen is there's going to be a push in the public square that every person is going to experience some form of transhumanism. It's going to be a microchip in the brain. There's going to be a push inside the public schools to have your children
Yeah.
microchipped. Well, Mom, if
Mm.
I don't get the microchip, I can't go to second grade.
Mm.
They're going to flunk me and keep me in first grade forever
Mm.
and ever
Mm.
because I won't be able to do the advanced stuff that the kids with the microchip are doing.
Mm.
Kids with the microchip can already speak every language spoken in Europe. I can't do that.
Mm.
The kids with the microchip are in advanced calculus in third grade, and here I am just trying to figure out how to do long division.
Yeah.
Mom, I got to have the microchip. Mom, I have to have the microchip. The teacher wants to see you, Mom, because you're resisting the microchip. And we're not going to do that. Your child is not going to be allowed to be retained in this system until
Mm.
you yield.
Mm.
Well, wait a minute. No, this is what the protocol is going to be. Now, how do you,
Yeah.
as a person, deal with that? Well, I'm organic. Oh, you're organic, huh? Yeah, right. Blah, 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 blah. We're going to fix your organicness. We're going to prosecute you. We're going to persecute you. We're going to deny you your digital currency. We're going to deny you your space in the public square. We're going to deny you your employment. We're going to deny this. We're going to deny that. So you see the cost of the faith now is going to
Mm.
be. And if you recall, what does it say in the scripture? When Mashiach returns, will he find any
Yeah.
faithful? Any
Mm.
faithful, right? Because the push of the Antichrist is just about upon us. Now,
Mm.
I don't think there's a lot of time left in this. I think the push of the Antichrist comes in 23 and in 24, 2023, 2024.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you're going to see this massive push. Now, the question is, how much damage is going to take place from the coming war?
Mm.
Now, all of this really is in the hands of Vladimir Putin, period.
Mm.
And in the hands of Yah, of course. Yah can do anything he wants. But a lot of people were saying, I mean, I saw Hal Turner speculating, well, maybe the U.S. has a laser system in space that will shoot down Putin's satellites. Maybe, but it doesn't shoot down the Poseidon weapon, which Putin has put to sea, which is a nuclear weapon that goes off and creates a 500-foot wave,
Mm.
which Russian television has already threatened to put over all of the UK, touching off this Poseidon off the northern coast of Ireland and literally covering all of the British Isles in a 500-foot wave. Now, this is what they've been advertising. This is what they put on Russian TV, right?
Mm.
So the thing is, a lot of it is going to depend on what Russia does. Now, I firmly believe, and I'm just going to say this on this program because we're on LAM and I can say it. I firmly believe, Jessica, that Russia is going to move with nuclear weapons in the very near future. We're talking about in the next, could be 3, 4, 5 days, could be 10 days.
Mm.
But it's going to be in the very near future. Now, today is the 6th of May. On the 9th of May, Russia is going to celebrate victory over the Nazis in World War II. And after that, who knows what's going to happen. So there is a very good chance that they are going to come against with nuclear weapons the following targets. Okay, all of the recently deployed armament on the Finnish-Russian border, all of the recently deployed armament in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. They're going to come against Poland in a huge way. Poland is going to be decimated. I mean, all of the armament along the Belarusian border in Poland is going to be completely destroyed, and they're probably going to strike Warsaw with a debilitating nuclear strike. Romania and all of the Romanian troops that are at the border of Romania and Moldova and Ukraine, all of those troops will probably be struck. And there is a chance that they may strike Berlin with a nuclear weapon. Okay. So and probably Gotland in Sweden, where the Swedes, there are troops. Those areas are probably the preliminary targets. It's also possible that there may be two additional targets. One is NATO headquarters in Brussels, and the other is London. Now, London may be a discrete strike. I suspect it will be a discrete strike, and it will be a strike that is going to be leveled primarily at the leadership in London.
The leadership.
Yeah, and so it's probably going to be something like the Crown, the city of London that they call the Crown, and also and the leadership, Parliament, and etc. The Russians have a massive hatred for Liz Truss. Okay, her name comes up continually in Russian dialogue.
Yeah.
And the other target would be NATO headquarters in Brussels. Okay, so, and as the Russians have said, you have 202 seconds from the time that the dagger, Kinzhal, is launched in Kaliningrad until it hits in London. 202 seconds. That's it. It's less time into Berlin. It's 150 seconds into Berlin. So if you look, Jessica, in Kizayon, in Revelation chapter 6, we talked about this a little bit previously on Eatin. Locusts. You see here that when you get to 6:2, Revelation 6:2, and I saw and behold a white, that isn't what I wanted to say. Let's look at 6:4. And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. Well, this word in Greek for sword is not sword at all. It's dagger.
Yeah.
It's dagger. And the Russians, who of course used to call themselves the Red Army, so Russian Krasnaya Army, Red Army, the Russians, they have a missile that's called the Kinzhal missile, Kinzhal. And the Kinzhal in Russian means dagger, dagger. And they've used this missile a couple of times in Ukraine, not often, I think 2 or 3 times. But to demonstrate its efficacy, it has precision targeting, and it is hypersonic. It travels at about 12 times the speed of sound. So as a consequence, a delivery from Kaliningrad to Moscow is 200, or from Kaliningrad to London is 202 seconds. And it can carry a 75 kiloton nuclear warhead. That's 6 times more powerful than what went off in Hiroshima. Okay. So it gives you an idea of capacity. Now, should this strike take place in any aspect of it, once nuclear weapons are used, should that strike take place, then the next equation is going to be, and the next question is going to be on the table for world leaders, Emmanuel Macron, Boris Johnson, and the United States. Do we retaliate with a massive nuclear retaliation against Russia? Russia is prepared for that. They've already told everybody, get your supplies, get your iodine, and convert your basement into a fallout shelter and on. Because they're expecting, quote unquote, retaliatory strikes from NATO. This was announced 2 weeks ago. If this happens, then the Russians are going to come back with a massive retaliatory strike. So the question now for the average European, whose governments appear to be committing suicide right now, is that what should we as a people do? Now, on one hand, I mean, I've seen people who've written essays in the United States. Oh, Americans are the biggest cowards on earth. We won't do anything about the fact that our Constitution has been violated, our elections have been stolen, that we're just being raped and pillaged by the progressives. They're even, they're targeting our children. We don't do a thing. We don't do a thing. But Yah has spoken to me directly and says, do not get in the way of my judgment. Do not get in the way of my judgment. This is Yah's judgment. It is not my judgment. We think that this man is doing it to us. This man is in power because Yah allowed him to be in power.
Yes.
He placed him here for such a time as this because judgment is coming upon the country. Now, there are some people at the United States Supreme Court who have recognized, okay, we're being judged. Well, I'm glad you guys could figure that out, right? A bunch of corrupt bums that they are. But 7 of the 9 of those justices are Catholics. Some of them are not just Catholics, but Jesuits. Now, when you have 7 out of 9 Catholics, what happens when Roe versus Wade comes before the court, the abortion case? What happens when that comes before the court?
They take dominance, don't they?
Yeah. Guess what? Sam Alito has written the majority decision, which was improperly and unethically leaked by somebody at the Supreme Court who should be brought up on criminal charges for doing it. But they leaked Sam Alito's majority opinion, setting aside Roe versus Wade. Now, this is exactly what I would expect from a Catholic court. However, this is one place where I have agreement with the court. Roe must be overturned. Roe must be overturned. We cannot continue on a path of licensed abortion. It is child sacrifice. It is putting your children before Molech in the eyes of God.
Yeah.
And so as a consequence, now there may be some fallout that's going to take place. It would be bad for women after this and so on and so forth. There's going to be a transition period. It's going to be difficult. There's going to be a whole bunch of things that come out of this, actually, if you want to know the truth of it. But nonetheless, it's something that had to be done. This as a fundamental to have the slightest chance of returning the pop culture to a moral order. Because what is coming for us as the believer is to return to being a moral person. Now, what does this returning to be a moral person mean? Well, does this mean that you're never going to commit sin anymore? Not a chance, right? He who says he is without sin is a liar, right? Does this mean we're going to return to committing no sin? No. What it means, though, is that we strive towards righteousness. We strive towards righteousness. And so some of the fundamentals are, number 1, let your yes be your yes and your no be your no. Let your name have integrity in its name. I put my name on that. I don't need to sign ink. I don't need to shake a hand. My name is on that. That is enough. To have that kind of moral standard, to have the moral standard inside your family, and to say that Yah calls us to a family, right? Even though they're bombing our house all the time, the state's at war with our family, he calls us to a family, a husband, a wife, because when the commandment says, you shall honor your mother and your father, from that springs the right of a child to a mother and a father. The child has a right to mom and dad.
Yeah.
And so these kinds of things become, and structuring the family unit, but it's important also for children to understand that they must obey their parents. There was an absolutely fantastic scene out of Africa, where the parents are criticized because they're so harsh with a child that doesn't obey. But here you were, this tribe was in Uganda. They were refugees. They were fleeing. They were in a tent community down in a gully. And they hear a truck coming. And the 3-year-old goes running up the hill. And the dad says, no, no, no. And the 3-year-old disobeys. He runs up to the top of the hill. The truck stops. It's full of guerrillas. They realize there's a encampment down there. They come down and slaughter everybody in the camp. Kill them all. Because the child disobeyed.
Yeah.
And we're coming into critical times such as this.
Yeah.
Right? We're coming into these kinds of critical times. And children don't know what they don't know. I didn't know that I didn't know that. Right. That's why I'm the parent and you're not. Because you didn't know that you didn't know. Right? And so these kinds of structures have to be brought to bear. We have to have much more responsive families, the family units have to be drawn together. You have to have honor and integrity between your family and your neighbor's family.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's very
It's
true.
very, very important. So, and part of that honor and integrity includes no false witness. Stop bearing false witness about your neighbor. Oh, did
Mhm.
you hear what so and so did? You're at the church, right? Did you hear
Yeah.
what so and so did? You know how
Yeah.
many churches the women study, they get together and gossip about everybody else in the
Yeah.
church?
Yeah. Mm.
None of it's true. They don't know it's true. They haven't established it by the testimony of two
That's
witnesses.
right.
And
Mm.
so is offending us.
Mm.
She is offending us because her behavior is below our standards.
Yeah.
She doesn't comb her hair enough when she comes to church. She wears the wrong dresses. Her purse doesn't match. Where does she think she is that she can
Mm.
do this? Blah, 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 right? All this yakety, and you don't know. And so the question is this. You have to ask yourself the Matthew 18 question. Did this person offend me?
Mm.
If they
Yeah.
did offend you, then you have to go to them and say, hey, you offended me, and this is how you did it. But when a person goes through something in their life that doesn't involve you, you may think that's below my moral standards, but how did they offend you? How did they offend you? I was confronted by a woman that said, well, you can't talk to that woman. She's been divorced. Well, how did her divorce affect you? Did you have a Matthew 18 conversation with her in front of the
Mm.
elders about her divorce affecting you? Do you know the inside workings of what was going on in that marriage, such that you could judge what was happening? Well,
Mm.
she got divorced, and divorce is unacceptable in our church. Well, fine. That's one thing. If you want to say you're divorced, you're not part of this fellowship. It's another thing to denounce her and say she's beneath our dignity,
Yeah.
she's beneath our care, she's beneath even knowing because she did something that did not meet my standards.
Mm.
This does not exalt or lift up a person, but rather destroys them, right?
Yeah.
Now, so when we get into community relationships, this is going to become important. It's going to become very important for
Yeah.
the people around you, Jessica, because
Mm.
in any community, there's one person that kind of rubs on you.
Yeah.
I can't deal with that person.
Mm.
I want that guy being here, right? Everything that comes out of
Mm.
his mouth just gets under my skin. I don't know.
Mm.
You're going to have to figure out a way to deal with that,
Yeah.
and to deal with that in terms of extending a hand of friendship, having, there's a great story in the book Ivanhoe, so Walter Scott, right? He wrote this book Ivanhoe, I love the book Ivanhoe, my favorite childhood book. And Ivanhoe's father was Cedric the Saxon, and he was under Norman rule. The Normans had just taken the country, and so he was under Norman rule. But he comes home, Ivanhoe comes home, and one of the guys confronts Cedric the Saxon because he is hosting the Jews. He's hosting Abraham and his daughter Sarah.
Mm.
Or no, her name wasn't Sarah. Anyway, he's hosting them, and somebody criticized Cedric. How can you host this Jew? And he says, my hospitality is not subject to your dictates.
Mm.
This is what I do. Doesn't matter that if he's a Jew or if he's a Norman or who he is. Doesn't matter. This is what I do.
Mm.
Not subject to your dictate.
Mm.
And it's the same with all of us. We have to have standards by which we live.
Yes. Yeah. That's right. So true. That's been challenged so much, and you get ridiculed for those standards as well. Spiritually, I hear from Yah. I've heard differently. I've heard from God, and it's different. You're living too much of a secluded life. It's not necessary. So you're absolutely true. And you've just got to keep on staying strong and holding on to your convictions because they are confirmed in the word. You don't go by what they're saying to you, the narrative that they're saying to you. This is very encouraging just to stay strong, because it's just, we
Just
get beaten down.
it's hard to stay strong when you're alone, right? What does it say in
Very.
Proverbs, right? A
Mm.
single cord is equally broken. A double
Yeah.
cord is much more difficult to break.
Yeah.
And even a
Mm.
triple cord is almost impossible, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's important to have friends and colleagues. And it's also important at this time, and this is going to become very important again, depending on how the war unfolds in Britain. If the war unfolds in Britain with limited strikes from Russia, okay, now, I mean, let's just put ourselves there for a minute. Suddenly, there's no electricity in all of Europe. Suddenly, there's no GPS in all of Europe. And Britain's nuclear capability has been destroyed and its leadership has been destroyed. And the banking community is gone. All right, now what now?
What now?
Well, you could see a great deal of chaos, and you could also see, which is very common in Britain, civil war erupt with, the white roses and the red roses coming up against one another, right? With these incredible sons of York that you never know what they're going to do, right? You could see these kinds of things start to emerge. You could see the Welsh assert independent sovereignty. You could see the Scots assert independent sovereignty. All of these things could happen and could happen quickly, and I suspect they probably will. But when you look at what's going on with the condition of the Welsh have a very interesting issue because of the collapse of the mountain that took out the elementary school. Okay, that was something that was single-handedly more capable of destroying the Welsh revival than anything else that has ever happened in Welsh history. Well, I take that back. There was a comet that came through in 590 that did a lot for the faith in that community. But you had this thing happen where this mountain collapsed and it came down and it didn't take out any of the other aspects of the village. It just crushed the elementary school and the 250 children that were there. Huge, massive tragedy. Queen Elizabeth describes it as the worst event in her entire tenure, that thing that happened in Wales, right? And that crushed, because those children were praying in school, right? They were praying in school. They were being taught a Christian lifestyle, a biblical lifestyle, in Welsh churches. And then all of a sudden, 250 are gone, a massive tragedy for the whole nation. Okay, well, now what? So how do the people in Wales respond? Well, a lot of the response, the political response, has been to become more and more progressive. So you see many of the courts, even though you're locked into a common law, which thank God you are.
Yeah.
Believe me, if you didn't have the common law in Britain, you would be a completely disease-ridden society. Only the tenets of the common law hold Britain together at all. And the common law has, there's so many aspects, so much beauty in the common law. It requires, for instance, a criminal act requires a victim, right? And even though the reasoning has gotten extreme, it doesn't make any difference. The point is that the common law really is some boundary upon which we can look and be reasonable and have an understanding about what's going on. That is the only thing that holds Britain together. Because you've had so much, an open license for pedophilia has been given ever since the exaltation of David Saville, right? And he was exalted and promoted by who? The BBC.
Yeah.
And his criminal acts were given a pass for 60 years.
Yeah.
And so as a consequence, that infection spread throughout the entire community, including through the royal house. There's a lot of discussion about Lord Mountbatten, before he was blown up by the IRA, concerning his predilections, right? So we know that pedophilia is a rampant problem throughout the British Isles. Whereas in the United States, abortion is our huge sin, but in Britain, pedophilia is the sin that is keeping you away from sanctity. It's keeping you away from blessing. It's keeping you away from Yah restoring the place. So these government officials who are engaged in keeping the pedophilia private throughout Britain and engaging in that, those kinds of things have to be pushed away, and it has to be pushed away with honor. And so really, I mean, if you are a pedophile or someone who's committed pedophilic acts, you really should, if you have any sense of repentance whatsoever, step down from your political post. Recognize that your moral transgressions have been too high for you to be in leadership anymore, and step down and allow someone else to move into that slot. You really have an obligation to do that. whether or not you're ever prosecuted or anything else, you need to step down.
Yeah.
And this kind of culture has to be weeded out. It has to be weeded out. Of course, we have a huge problem again in the digital world, where you've had an expansion of pornography since the digital world was created, right? We know that pornography was given a license with Albert Kinsey in 1948 with the Kinsey Report. He was a pedophile. He was sexually molesting infants.
Mm.
His report.
Yeah.
It is rumored that he was assisted by none other than Joseph Mengele, the Doctor of Death from the
Yeah.
Nazis,
Mm.
who was given a free pass to enter the United States under Operation Paperclip. So Joseph Mengele, who by the way was personal friends with George H.W. Bush, he comes into the country and he's working with Albert Kinsey or Alfred Kinsey, to produce the Kinsey Report. Hugh Hefner, the founder of Playboy, then pushes this through and says, "I'm going to become a pamphleteer for Alfred Kinsey." And in doing so, one of Hugh Hefner's most prolific retail sites, if you will, was the Playboy Club in London.
In London.
He was making a ton of money on that Playboy Club. And then you see with the James Bond movies, 007.
Yeah.
Sean Connery was Hugh Hefner with a gun. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically who he was, right? So you had very much this Playboy model. All the openings of the James Bond movies would have scenes that were Playboy-esque in the fronts of the movies, right? And then he would be always it would be a different girl every movie and on and on. So you show number one, you show promiscuity, you show adultery, you show there's no marital relationship. Right? That doesn't appear in James Bond at all, right? And so you have this whole idea of this proliferation of 007 as a persona, and that persona then gets increased when you see the revolution that took place with the Beatles coming in and all of this, and then from 1964 to 1968, you go from a little bit of hair over the ears of the Beatles, right? Long-haired hippie gnomes running around in 4 years.
Yeah.
And all of this thing began to proliferate into a culture that became immoral, wide open, and anything and everything goes. Well, anything and everything led to anything and everything, which became sexual sin of the highest order and criminal acts of the highest order. So when we're talking about trying to repair the society, eventually, we start with this abortion change up in Roe versus Wade. Now we have to take on this issue of pornography, because it is said that the average child has seen every possible pornography you could imagine by the age of 13.
That's awful, isn't it? To think your children and their peers could be exposed to something like that.
Well,
awful isn't the word. You're vengeful and angry.
Yeah, pornography is like a blowtorch to the soul. Like somebody comes in with a blowtorch and just, and the next thing you got scar tissue. Wherever the pornography is touched, you've got scar tissue there. And so this is why pornography is going to have to be tackled. It's going to have to be tackled. And the way they're tackling it in California, the way they're tackling it in Washington is show kindergartners the stuff. That's how they're tackling it in those states. Well, let's teach the kindergartners, a third grade question in Washington public schools. Distinguish between soft porn and hard porn. That's a third grade essay question.
Gosh.
You see?
Now,
when we talk about this stuff, we have to talk about this stuff because we have to talk about what does it take to come out of her, lest share in her plagues. All of these things have to be evaluated, and when you evaluate them, you have to ask yourself the question: what can I do to come out? On one hand, there's going to be you leaving voluntarily. On the other hand, there's going to be somebody at the door pushing you out. Oh, you won't take the snake bite? We're pushing you out. Oh, you won't produce your your Vax passport, your green passport? You're out. Oh, you won't take the microchip? You're out, right? These are the questions that are going to be before you here in the very near future. And so when these questions are before you, you have to ask yourself the question, who am I?
Yeah.
Are you a child of Yah or not?
Mm.
If you are a child of Yah, you're going to have to retain your organic state.
Mm.
Just say natural. Now, when we continue more in this program, Jessica, when we get farther and farther into discussing the Sefer
Please.
and discussing these things, we are going to have to talk about the issue of the calendar. And the issue of the calendar is a pretty big one because, it begins with Shabbat.
Mm.
So if we look real quickly at Ezekiel 2020, we can get 2020 vision by looking at Ezekiel 2020, because then it becomes very clear. Because it doesn't become clear in this 14.5. So they have to turn to just per chapter. Okay, here we go. 2020,
Ezekiel.
Yekeskel.
2020. And hallow my Shabbats, and they shall be a sign between me and you, and ye may know that I am Yahuwah Elohim.
So what's the sign between us and Yah?
The calendar, the dates,
The Shabbat.
the Shabbat.
Halloween, the Shabbat. It all begins with Shabbat. So who are your friends, right? Who are your brothers and sisters? They are Sabbatarians. They are Sabbatarians. Initially, they are Sabbatarians. They are these who guard and protect and keep the Shabbat. Okay. Now, let's go to Jubilees chapter 2, and I'll show what I mean by this. And this becomes an important part of coming out of her, my people. Now, I personally think that instead of having anti-pornography laws following this abandonment of Roe versus Wade, we're going to see instead a Sunday Sabbath being imposed because the Romans are in control. But Sunday was never the Sabbath. Let me ask you this. What's the word in Spanish for Saturday?
I'm not too sure. Some to do with the sun or something, as far as I know. Not more than that.
Sabato.
Sabator, right.
What's the word in Russian for Saturday? Subotu. Subotu. What's the word in Georgian for Saturday? Shabbat.
Really? Ah, so they all have that common thread.
Spanish, sábado. Italian, sabato. Sabato. Even the Italians recognize that Saturday is the Sabbath.
Yeah.
The Spanish, the Portuguese, the Russians. In fact, there's only a few countries in the world, primarily France, Germany, the Nordic countries, and Britain, that do not call Saturday the Sabbath. It's not Sunday. Sunday is the mark of Rome. Sunday is the leather leash of Rome. Sunday is the collar of Rome. Okay, so in Jubilees 2, you have a discussion that begins in verse 18. Verse 18. Right? And he says here, it's quite a long verse, but I'm going to give it to us. And he gave us a great sign, the Shabbat, that we should work 6 days, but guard the Shabbat on the 7th day from all work. And all the angels of the presence and all the angels of the sanctification, these 2 great classes, he has bidden us to guard the Shabbat with him in heaven and on earth. You see, the Shabbat is kept in heaven with the angels of the presence and with the angels of sanctification. They all keep the Shabbat. So when you pray, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, right? Well, here it is. In heaven, they keep the Shabbat. And he said, verse 20, once again, verse 20, right? And he said unto us, behold, I will separate unto myself a people from among all the peoples, and these shall guard the Shabbat.
Mm.
Let me read that again. I will separate unto myself a people, separate. They will come out of her. They will be different from the other people on earth, and they will be from all the other people on earth, and these shall guard my Shabbat, and I will sanctify them unto myself as my people, and I will bless them as I have sanctified the Shabbat, and do sanctify it unto myself. Even so will I bless them, and they shall be my people, and I will be their Elohim.
Yeah. Mm.
So this becomes a big deal. Okay?
Yeah. Wow, that's a great explanation for so many because they're so new to this, but that is one of the things that is important to them. I can tell you that will resonate with so many, giving a foundation where really they've been searching for answers here. So, thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of so many. I can just feel that the reverberating with them to understand that.
Well, I mean, when we talk about this, so this is the first step is Shabbat. Now, when we talk about getting Shabbat, okay, so do like a friend of mine did. He used to work for Boeing, and he decides, well, I'm going to keep the Sabbath. So he goes into his employer and says, look, I keep the Sabbath now. You're going to have to give me Saturday off, period. That's the way it is. And his boss says, well, that's fine. I'll give you Saturday off. I'm also giving you Monday off, Wednesday off, Tuesday and Thursday because you're fired.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm.
You don't do that.
Mm.
Because the Shabbat is a spiritual thing. It is not a physical. I mean, it is a physical thing, yes, but it is fundamentally a spiritual thing.
Mm.
So you have to pray for Shabbat.
Mm-hmm.
You have to pray that Yahweh will give you Shabbat. You have to pray for this. And when he does, you will know it because suddenly your employer is going to go, hey, I got a spot for you here that doesn't include Saturday. How's that grab you?
Mm. Okay.
And you will find that when Friday night comes in and comes into Saturday, when you come into the Shabbat, what a day it is. I mean, I had a friend when he first came into Shabbat, he used to send me pictures off his deck. He lived in his house over a lake, and he took pictures off his deck with the sun setting out over the lake. And he would say, Shabbat Shalom, yeah, here it is. We've worked hard the last 6 days and we have arrived at Shabbat. And boom, it becomes, but you remember that the scripture says 6 days you shall work, not 5 days, not 4, not 3 days. 6 days you shall work, and the seventh day shall be Shabbat. So Shabbat is a Sabbatarian is the first thing you want to be in this world. Sabbath. Come out of the Roman leash. Rome will tell you point blank. Yeah, the seventh day is the Sabbath. The Saturday is the Sabbath. We know that. We changed it to Sunday to show you how powerful Rome is.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sunday is the mark of the authority of Rome.
Yes.
When we talk about the history of Britain, the church in Britain before the arrival of Augustine, the church in Britain kept a 7-day Sabbath. It was only when Augustine shows up that he imposes the Roman collar on Britain. He imposes the Roman collar. No, you shall wear this leather leash. You shall wear this leather collar. You shall put up a statue of Mary. You shall. I've been in Catholic churches, Jessica, I'm not kidding you. I've been in a Catholic church that behind the altar is a mural painting of Mary ascending into heaven.
You can imagine.
Look, we've got 87 books in this effort. 87 books. Go ahead and show me where it's written that Mary ascended into heaven. Now, we also published Havot, which has got a bunch of New Testament writings in it. Show me in Havot. Show me in the writings of Justin Martyr, the writings of Clement, the writings of Barnabas, the writings of Peter, the writings of Paul, the writings of James, where Mary ascends into heaven. You know where they get that doctrine?
I was just going to ask you.
Well, it comes from a Gnostic text that was written in the 3rd century called the Entomelion of James. Gnostic. And James was 200 years dead.
Mm.
Here comes this Entomilion of James, written by a pseudepigraphal writer, Gnostic writing, that claims that Mary was sinless and ascended into heaven. Now, that was adopted by the Catholic Church's official doctrine in 1959. The church is not the church of Jesu Cristo.
Mm.
It is not. The Catholic Church is not the
No.
church of Jesu Cristo. It is the church of Miriam, period. Ave Maria.
Mm.
What's the theme song of the Catholic Church? Ave Maria.
Mm.
What's the prayer given to you? Ave Maria.
Mm.
Right? Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Oh, you committed sins. You need to go out there and pray to Mary 7 times,
Mm.
40 times. Hail Mary, right? Ave Maria. And so the Ave Maria, of course, this is the center of the church,
Yeah.
because the church worships the Queen of Heaven. It does not worship Mashiach.
Mm.
So in this church, I'm looking at this painting, this mural of Mary ascending to heaven and the apostles looking at that. And I said, okay, well, where's Mashiach in all this mess? They had literally, I'm not kidding you, they had an 8x10 black and white picture on that wall over there,
Yeah.
that wall.
Mm.
8x10. That's what you get.
Yeah.
And even when you walk into an Orthodox church, what do you walk into an Orthodoxy?
Mm.
You walk into an Orthodox church, you find virgin with baby, mother with baby,
Mm.
mom with baby. You know what I'm talking? You know the icon I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm seeing it. Yeah. Visualizing
Usually
it.
in gold, usually in gold, mother with baby, and
Yeah.
everybody comes in and kisses the
Yeah.
icon,
The feet.
mother with baby. Right?
Mm.
Where's Mashiach in all this?
Mm.
Where's the Messiah in all this? Now, interestingly enough, Jessica, if you go into the Palazzo Ducale in Venice, the Palazzo,
Mm.
now Venezia was a republic that lasted for 1,000 years, over 1,000 years.
Mm.
But Venice itself is a very interesting study, because you have the northern side of the canal and you have the southern side of the Grand Canal. And then you have a Jewish ghetto, literally the first ghetto in the world. It was called a ghetto.
Mm.
Jewish enclave at the far western side of the island. So the northern part of the Grand Canal actually had a form of Byzantium, which they practiced. The Christian faith, there was a form of Byzantium. And the
Mm.
Venetian language, by the way, is completely different than the Italian language. I don't even think it's a Latin language.
Mm.
And then you have, of course, the southern island, the southern part of the island, which is Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
So the southern part of the island is impoverished, poor. There's nothing going on. The northern part of the island, when you walk into the Palazzo Ducale, what do you see? The murals painted on the wall of the Doji, those were all Mashiach. All those murals were Mashiach and scenes of the Messiah,
Mm.
you know, Garden of Gethsemane or whatever. But all of this is in the Doge's main office.
Mm.
Go into the Supreme Court, again, murals of Mashiach. You go
Mm.
into the Palace of the Representatives, right, which used to be the largest building in Europe, by the way, and all of its murals across the scene are all Mashiach.
Mm.
You walk into the Catholic Church, it's all Mary, 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 Mary.
Yeah. Yes.
On the side where Mashiach is, you have prosperity. You have the blessing of a republic that lasts for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
You walk on the side that is Mary worship, and you have poverty, massive churches, and extreme poverty.
Mm.
Go back to the Jewish ghetto, which literally they used to have a bridge in and a bridge out. That was it. And we could put a guard here, and you guys aren't coming out.
Mm.
Now they still have that, but they have a third entrance now that goes out of the middle of the ghetto. But still, the Jewish ghetto is still present there on that island in Venezia. But I wanted to point that out so you can really clearly see when a country follows the Messiah and not following Mary.
Yeah.
And you have to remember that, again, not to give the people in the Republic of Ireland grief for being Catholics,
Mm.
but the average Catholic has to ask himself some questions.
Mm.
You have to ask. You can't just sit here and say, well, I was taught to pray 7 Hail Marys and that's what I'm
Yeah.
going to do.
Mm.
Ask yourself the question, what is transubstantiation? Is it allowed in Scripture?
Yeah.
Is incantation? Is
Mm.
that allowed in Scripture? You have to ask yourself these questions.
Yeah.
And you have to ask yourself the question, what does the Scripture say, not what does Rome say?
Mm.
For years,
Very good. Yeah.
you might recall this, that the Catholic Church used to have fish on Friday.
Yes, yeah.
You remember
It's
this?
still very popular here, more than the Catholic Church have taken it on. Yeah.
We have to have fish on Friday. Why do we have to have fish on Friday? Because we pay homage to Dagon, the fish god.
Mhm.
Well, who's Dagon, the fish god? Well, Dagon, the fish god, was worshipped in ancient, by the Philistines and also by the Canaanites, and he
Mm.
was a fish god. And the priests of Dagon would come in to officiate, and they had these costumes that they would put on that was a fish head,
Yeah.
and then it would come all
Mm.
the way down with a fish tail on the floor. These were
Mm.
the priests of Dagon. Well, what
Yeah.
do you think the mitre is that the Pope wears?
Yeah. 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 All of them in Rome. It's so similar, isn't it? The
The
shape
mitre
and the
is the fish
gowns.
head.
Yeah.
It is the fish head of Dagon, and it has a little tail on the back,
Yeah. Even the poles that they hold. So yeah.
right?
Wow. Mm.
So, so why do you eat fish on Friday? Because you're not just worshiping Yahweh, you're also worshiping the fish god Dagon.
Yeah. Mm.
Why do you celebrate the feast of Easter? Now, most people will tell you, well, we celebrate Easter because it's the resurrection of Mashiach,
Yeah.
right? As they say in the Russian, Christos voskres. Poistana voskres. Christ is risen. Yes, he is risen. And I tell my Russian friends, Christos voskres, Lenin yeshosha grobnitsia. Christ is risen. Lenin's still stuck in the tomb. He never rose. He's still there. He's still hanging
Yeah.
on the tomb. Okay.
Mm.
So but here's the thing: when you talk about this idea of Christos voskres or Christ has risen, okay, Resurrection Sunday. But why do we call it Easter? Why is it celebrated with the bunny? Why is it celebrated with Easter eggs? Right? Because it's a fertility ritual that is given in honor of Ishtar, the
Yeah.
fertility goddess of ancient Mesopotamia.
Mm.
Right? So you have the church, Roman church, celebrating Ishtar, celebrating Dagon, celebrating Nimrod, celebrating Mithras. What's the theme song of Italy, right? O Sole Mio.
Mm.
O Sole Mio, ya da da da, ba da
Yeah.
da da da, ba da da da, right? O Sole Mio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I used to think it was O Solo Mio, right? Oh, me singing alone, right? But it's O Sole Mio. It's reverence of the sun.
Really. Good.
Oh, my son, right?
Yeah.
O Sole Mio, oh, my son, right? Reverence of the sun. This is the
Mm.
song of Italy, O Sole
Very
Mio,
true.
right? Why? Because you have open sun worship going on.
Mm. So deep. Then, in that respect, what nation do you have that doesn't have this type of thing going on to come out of her? It makes it so much more harder, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean,
Mm.
when you really see it, you see whether you're talking about the serpent cults in the
Yeah.
Aztec Empire, in the Incan Empire, in the Egyptian Empire, in the Hindu Empire, in ancient China, serpent cult, ancient China, in ancient serpent cult in Thailand, ancient serpent cult in Japan. You had the serpent cults throughout all of the world, right? And we're not called to a serpent cult. We're called, Mashiach swallowed up the serpent. He is bruising the head of the serpent.
Mm.
And so, all of these things become really important because the true faith that is represented in Scripture, the true faith represented in Scripture is a faith that is wholly organic. It is complete. We have a creator. He made us and he gave us a set of instructions by which to live. It's an easy yoke and a light burden.
Mm.
Come to me,
Yeah.
all ye who are
Labour.
weary and burdened, and
Yeah.
I will give you rest.
Yeah.
Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart, and I will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy
Yeah.
and my burden is light.
Mm. Mm. Beautiful.
And so these are the words of Mashiach. This is the faith that we have been given, and many people in the countries we're talking to today have grown up in this faith. They've grown up with tenets of this faith, whether it's been
Yeah.
taught in the Catholic Church or taught from the Church of England or the
Mm.
Church of Canada or the Church of Australia or the Church of Scotland, wherever
Mm.
it has been taught, whether you came up in a Presbyterian church, whether you came up in a Dutch church, whatever your situation may be, there have been tenets of the faith that have been taught to you. Now, those tenets are kind of like rough cut wood. Thanks for cutting this rough cut wood. I can't build with it until it's planed and
Mm.
kilned and cut to size.
Mm.
And to plane it and to kiln it and to cut it to size, you have to read the rest of the story.
Mm. Wow. what I want to ask you, Dr. Pidgeon, it's in line with what you're saying. It's coming on the different platforms. So you were talking about the Sabbath, keeping the Shabbat, keeping the Sabbath. People are wanting to know because this is new to them. They're just walking into Torah, or they're not, but they know that this is correct. This is this right day of worship. So someone who comes from a culture like Britain, Australia, where they're not used to Torah, how would you advise them to come into this type of worship, to separate themselves, but also what should they do? They don't have, what they're saying is we don't have these neighbors besides us. We're very much on our own. It's programs like this that is our counsel. It's programs like this that we are getting what you're saying we need physically. So could you just speak into that before we end?
Sure. Yeah, when you talk about keeping Shabbat, there are really just kind of two simple rules that you need to follow. One is don't do your work, and the other is don't buy or sell. Now, those are the two don'ts. The do's are spend the day with Yah. Now, it's for a lot of people, it's going to be really hard. It's like, what do you want me to just not do anything? I had people ask me that. Do you really take the day off? You know, yeah, I do. Of course, I was able to because Yah gave it to me. He gave me the Shabbat. So I was able to take the day off. But so what that means is like, you could say, well, isn't there a Friday night ritual? Do I have to light 2 candles and say, Yahweh bless you and keep you? He always, you don't have to sing that song and you don't have to light 2 candles.
Yeah.
But it is a good time to be with family and to, you want to, Friday, to have a good Shabbat, you have to have a good Friday. You have to prepare. You have to have a good preparation day. So you want to prepare the food you're going to eat for Saturday on Friday. Because you're not going to be cooking on Saturday. So you want to have your food prepared. Now, by the time you get to 6 o'clock Saturday evening, well, now you can cook a dinner if you want. But during the Saturday, you're going to be eating stuff that is not cooked. And so because you're not cooking, you're not making anyone cook. And so the Sabbath teaching is, you shall not work, and neither shall your maid or your employees work, or neither shall anyone else in your family work, nor shall you cause anyone else to work, which means if you buy or sell, you're causing someone else to work, right? And so that's the question. Is what you're doing going to cause someone else to work? Well, they're working anyway. Nope, that's not a reason. Even though they are working, you're not supposed to be buying and selling from somebody who is working on Shabbat. To do it. So it begins on Friday evening. We usually mark it at 6 o'clock because around here, if we waited for sunset, we wouldn't have Sabbath until September, right? I mean, we're already into the long days here.
Yeah.
The sun right now is coming up at the sun's coming up at 6 and going down at 10:30. And so in another by the time we get to May 15th, there isn't going to be any night. The sun may go down, but we only go to dusk. So it stays light all the time. So I can't sit here and say I have to wait till sundown. So we use 6 p.m. as a marker.
Okay.
6 p.m. Friday evening begins Shabbat. 6 p.m. Saturday evening ends Shabbat. And you begin Shavuot Tov. You begin the new week. And so with the Shabbat, when the 6 p.m. comes, then you want to have whatever it is that you were doing, you want to have it prepared. So if you cooked a meal before 6, well, then you can eat the meal after 6. But it is the time where you really want to take the time to rest. Now, we fellowship. Myself, I have a fellowship on Friday evening, and of course, we do the Sabbath teaching on Saturday morning, which fellowshipping allows us to interface with Yah and to discuss scripture and discuss the things of Yah, which I think are really important. That at this time, it's much more important to talk about what Yah has done and what Yah is doing and what Yah will do than it is to talk about what governments have done and governments will do and what governments are going to do. Much more important to talk about what Yah is going to do, because we find our instruction. But so the general rule is you want to bless Yah with your life on this day. And so when you realize that, gee, I'm not working and I'm not causing anyone else to work and I'm not buying or selling, well, then what am I doing? Well, I guess it's time to turn on sports and get mesmerized by my favorite football team until I can't see straight. And then I'll concentrate on whether or not Barcelona is going to trample on Manchester. You know what I mean? Yeah. in Manchester, you know how it is, right? What's the name of the team in Manchester? I forget their name, but the most celebrated team. They were the most celebrated team.
Manchester United, yeah.
Manchester United, they're the most celebrated team in Britain. It's like, these guys are the cats meow. Well, I guess if I had a vested interest in Manchester United, but anymore, we don't even have a vested interest in the United Kingdom. We don't even have a vested interest in our country. Our countries have been at war with us, trying to kill us. So
right.
What vested interest do we have in the properties and the chattel property of the country? We have a vested interest in Yah's kingdom.
Yeah.
Therefore, it behooves us to take the time to figure out what's going on in Yah's kingdom. Take the time to figure that out.
It's actually 9:25, so we can do about 2 more minutes, which I want to hand over to you. But thank you. One question, what we're going to have to cover next week. It's people who have come out, and what do they do? No church on a Sunday. How do they worship? So you've answered the bit about giving it to Yah, putting attention on him, but gathering. If they haven't got the Shabbat like we have, then how do they do that? Thinking of them in their culture.
Yeah, the gathering is important, Jessica, and I'll tell you, that's part of the reason why I started the Saturday Sabbath Fellowship, so that we could gather. And for a lot of people who are watching this, we have Telegram groups. If you go to the Sefer Shabbat group, you can get linked up with a Telegram group that's in your country, that's in your area, that's in your state, that's in your province, and you can meet people. You'll be surprised at who has the same faith as you, and who is a near neighbor.
Yeah.
With whom you can join, right? And so we've seen people getting together for baptisms, getting together for Passover, and that. Oh, you mean you're here? Yeah, I'm here. I only live this far from you. Well, let's drive to each other and let's,
Yeah.
But those are things.
We'll push that ahead far more next week because people want that, and that's good. It's a different mentality and a culture. So you speaking into that and giving direction really helps, because all of a sudden they have a void. But I'm so sorry, Dr. Pidgeon, thank you for your investment today into these people, into their lives and country. We bless you. We look forward to seeing you next Friday for Answers for Our Time. We love you guys. Take care.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.
2, 3, and. Kadosh, Kadosh, Echad Yisrael, Baruch Shemo Adonai.